All right, let's take a look at some connections problems. All right, so in this example, we have a school orchestra. They discovered they still needed $78. So to earn that $78, they decided to have a cookie dough sale. They bought cookie dough from a local company and then sold it for $10 a bucket. They made 4 times the amount they needed and sold 40 buckets in the process. How much did the orchestra pay the cookie dough company for each bucket? So we kind of have to sit down and say, okay, what do we have going on here? They needed $78. How much did they end up making? It says they made 4 times the amount they needed. So they made 4 times $78. That's how much they made total on this cookie dough sale. Well, how did they get that money? They sold each bucket of dough for $10 a bucket, and they sold 40 buckets. So they had 40 buckets, they sold them for $10 a piece. Okay, but they did have to pay something to the cookie dough company. So we have to subtract from that the amount they paid the cookie dough company. Again, they paid them per bucket. So there were 40 buckets, and we don't know how much we paid them. So I'm gonna call that B. I'm gonna use a capital B so it's easier to tell it's not a 6. Okay, now it looks like an 8, unfortunately. Okay, so this is how this is set up. Hopefully this makes sense. They made 4 times $78, 4 times the amount they needed. To make that, they sold 40 buckets of dough at $10 a bucket, but had to subtract from that the amount they paid to the company for each bucket. Okay, so this is the setup that we currently have. We want to solve and find out what that B is. How much did they have to pay that company for each bucket they sold? So let's do a little bit of simplification. Let's do that multiplication to get rid of all of those parentheses. So 4 times 78 is 312. 40 times 10 is 400. And then we have minus 40b. Now in algebra we learned how to solve these equations. We first need to get rid of that 400, so we're going to subtract 400 from both sides. And when we do that, we get negative 88 equals negative 40b. We still need to solve for that b. The problem is it's multiplied by a negative 40. So we do the opposite of multiplying by negative 40, and we divide both sides by negative 40. And that gives us our B, or the amount per bucket that they paid the cookie dough company. And I get 2.2. So $2.20 a bucket is what they paid to the cookie dough company, and then turned around and sold them for $10 a bucket. Okay, let's take a look at this next one. Jamal and his friends are having a car wash to raise money for a school play. Over the first weekend, they make $242. That was 80% of what they set out to earn. If they collect $17 for each car, that's a pretty expensive car wash. How many more cars do they need to wash to get to their goal? They've only done 80% so far. Okay, so let's break this down and figure it out. Okay, first of all, we need to know how much more money they need to make. Okay, it says so far they've made $242. Now that $242 is 80% of the amount they need total. So that would be equal to 0.8, that's our 80%, of whatever the total amount they need is, that X. I'm going to solve that so that I know where I'm going with this. How much more money do I need to make? It's because they've made 80% of the total. To solve that, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.8. And when I do, I get $302.50. So overall, they needed $302.50. So far, they've made $242 of those dollars. How much do they have left to make? Well, let's go ahead, and they needed $302. So far, they've made $242. So they are missing $60.50. That's all they have left to make. So they're doing this car wash and they're charging $17 a car. How many more cars do they need to wash to get this $60.50? Well, they get $17 per car, so $17 times each car ends up being $60.50. Let's solve that for the car. Divide both sides by 17 and we'll find out how many cars these people have left. We get 3.55, but notice no one is going to let you wash 0.55 of their car and pay you for it. So let's just go ahead and round that up to 4. So they need to wash 4 more cars, charging $17 a car, in order to get that last 20% that they needed.